The Emperor's palace on Arthes. 9 gleamed under twin suns, a towering labyrinth of spires and crystalline corridors, each shimmered with the energy of 1,000 bioluminescent veins. It was said that no being in the galaxy could withstand the temperament of the royal hatchlings, the Emperor's precious dragons, but somehow they had survived millennia, reigning terror over caretakers, advisors, and even the most seasoned dragonologists. The dragons were not merely pets. They were living symbols of imperial authority, capable of incinerating anyone who displeased them. And yet, for all their fiery might, they were astonishingly fragile. The problem, everyone agreed, was simple. No one understood their language. Attempts at bonding, feeding, and nurturing the hatchlings invariably ended in scorch marks, nervous breakdowns, or in some tragic cases, entire wings of the palace being temporarily quarantined after a hatchling had taken offense to an improperly prepared meal. Scholars and caretakers came from across the galaxy, each boasting credentials, each promising the Emperor that they could master the dragonlings' care. And each failed spectacularly. Enter Kael Rivers, a human nurse from the outer Terran colonies, whose only credentials were empathy, patience, and a stubborn belief that life, any life, could be understood with enough observation. Kael had spent decades in remote medical stations treating alien infants, learning how to communicate without words, interpreting subtle gestures, and soothing fears that transcended species. He was, by all accounts, the last person anyone expected to survive more than a few hours in the Imperial Nursery. Kael's first impression of the nursery was of utter chaos. 4 hatchlings, each no larger than a human child but already bristling with claws and teeth, scuttled and soared through a room lined with reinforced crystal walls. Their scales glimmered with colors impossible to name, shifting with every emotion. They screeched and hissed in a language that shook the very floor, and above it all, the Emperor's chief dragonologist, a Uran named Valrix, floated in exasperation, sparks flying from his biotic interface as he attempted to calm them. "They will destroy you within the hour," Valrix warned. His voice, translated into common Terran, carried a mixture of awe and fear. "No one can tame them, human. We've tried everything. Every discipline. Every stimulant. Every lullaby. And yet, every attempt ends in chaos." Kael merely nodded, adjusting the strap of his medbag. "I don't plan to tame them," he said quietly. "I plan to listen." The first hour was a disaster. Kael observed more than acted, noting the subtleties of scale flickers, the rhythm of breaths, the variations in hisses that seemed almost musical. He let the dragons approach him on their terms, retreating when they bared teeth, offering hands only when they inched forward with curiosity. Slowly, one of the hatchlings, a small iridescent green named Lyrics, tested the human's patience, poking a claw through the air near Kael's shoulder. Instead of recoiling, Kael whispered in a calm, measured tone, "I see you. You're scared. That's okay." He held his hand out flat, not threatening, just present. Lyrics blinked, tilted its head, and in an instant, the tension in the room shifted. The other hatchlings paused mid-screech, sensing something unfamiliar. A human who did not demand obedience, did not flinch in fear. By the 3rd hour, Kael was on the nursery floor, each hatchling circling, sniffing, testing. He sang softly, not words but a melody of vibrations, mimicking the hums the hatchlings made when content. The Emperor's advisors whispered nervously among themselves. This was not training, not discipline. It was something else. And the results were undeniable. One by one, the dragons began to respond, matching the human's tone, lowering claws, even nuzzling his arm with scales warm as coals yet harmless. Kael noted every reaction in meticulous detail. A flick of the tail indicated distrust, A hiss with a raised snout indicated hunger, a rolling purr meant comfort. By evening, the emperor himself appeared at the nursery's entrance, tall, regal, with scales that shimmered like polished onyx along his arms, a sign of ancient draconic lineage. His gaze swept the room, expecting disaster, but found instead a human lying on the floor, surrounded by 4 sleeping hatchlings, their bodies pressed against him like living cushions. "I do not understand," the emperor said, his voice a low rumble that reverberated through the crystalline walls. "How does one human achieve what an entire cadre of dragonologists could not?" Kael smiled gently, brushing a warm claw. "I didn't command them. I didn't train them. I just listened and respected that they are beings with minds of their own." The emperor's eyes narrowed, studying Kael as if measuring the worth of this fragile species against the might of his own. Then slowly a flicker of amusement, or perhaps admiration, touched his features. "Perhaps. You are unlike any human I have encountered." The next days were trials. Kael established routines, not for the emperor's expectations, but for the hatchlings' comfort. Feeding schedules, gentle games, and silent observation sessions. Each hatchling began to display unique personalities. Lyrics, curious and bold. Sapon, reserved but perceptive. Trelia, playful and mischievous. And Zorith, temperamental and fiercely protective. Kael learned to recognize moods in subtle scale shimmerings and eye movements, creating a silent communication that no other human or alien had managed. Yet danger lingered. A rival court faction attempted sabotage, releasing a high-pitched sonic disruptor into the nursery in hopes of injuring the hatchlings and discrediting Kael. In a blur of speed and instinct, Kael shielded the dragons, using his body as a barrier while calming their panicked motions. By the time security intervened, the hatchlings were unharmed, clustered protectively around their human guardian. The emperor, witnessing this firsthand, finally understood the depth of human resilience and adaptability. For the first time in centuries, the emperor allowed a human full access to the imperial nursery. Kael had not only survived, he had transformed the dynamic. Where others had used fear, force, or science, Kael had used empathy, patience, and understanding. And the dragons, once symbols of untouchable power, had found a protector who did not seek control but connection. But Kael knew the real challenge had only begun. Handling a dragon was one thing. Earning their trust meant venturing deeper into the mysteries of draconic intelligence, navigating political intrigue, and confronting enemies who underestimated humanity at every turn. The nursery was now a sanctuary, but beyond its walls, the galaxy remained indifferent, and often hostile, to the quiet brilliance of human empathy. And so, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the palace in molten gold, Kael Rivers prepared for what no human before him had attempted, becoming not just a caretaker, but a bridge between species, a living testament to the potential of humanity, and the first human to truly understand the Emperor's most precious treasures. The following weeks in the Imperial Nursery became a study in quiet revolution. Kael's approach, once doubted and dismissed, was now a subject of fascination and whispered admiration. The hatchlings responded to his presence with an ease no one had imagined possible, yet Kael remained vigilant, knowing that trust was fragile and could be shattered by the smallest misstep. He began experimenting with subtle methods of communication. Using vibrations, soft hums, and carefully modulated light from his medpack, Kael created a language of signals that the hatchlings could understand without fear. Lyrics learned to anticipate his gestures. Sapon began responding to subtle hand movements, and Trelia followed the pattern of his breathing as if synchronizing herself to his rhythm. Even Zorith, the most volatile of the four, leaned into Kael's calm presence, offering the occasional reluctant nuzzle. Word spread across the palace and eventually the court. Ambassadors from distant systems came, curious to witness the human who had mastered the impossible. Some were dismissive at first, scoffing at the notion that a fragile, unarmored human could command the loyalty of beings who had tormented the galaxy's most experienced handlers. But every visitor left astonished, witnessing dragons who once scorched with instinctive fury now curling contentedly around a human, eyes half closed in trust and comfort. Not everyone celebrated. The Emperor's council, long accustomed to using the dragons as tools of intimidation and influence, fretted over the implications. A human forming bonds with the imperial dragons threatened centuries of political control. Kael, however, remained focused on the hatchlings' welfare, unwilling to bend to schemes designed to exploit them. Then came the challenge that would define his time in the palace. A coalition of rogue nobles, angered at Kael's growing influence, orchestrated a raid on the nursery. Using cloaked ships, they attempted to kidnap the hatchlings under cover of night, confident that no human or alien could protect them. Kael sensed the intrusion before alarms sounded. Years of working with creatures far stronger than humans had honed his instincts. He moved swiftly, guiding the hatchlings into a protected chamber designed to simulate their natural habitat. Each dragon responded without hesitation, forming a circle around him, their scales glinting with defensive energy. Kael whispered directions in his unique dialect, signaling them to spread subtle fire barriers, not lethal but enough to disorient intruders. When the rogue nobles breached the first door, they were met not with fury but with a coordinated defense. Lyrics darted through the air, creating illusions of fire that forced them to retreat. Sapon blocked corridors with precise bursts of heat, while Trelia and Zoreth flanked with agility no human could match. All the while, Kael remained calm, guiding, reassuring and coordinating. Within minutes, the would-be kidnappers found themselves trapped in a maze of harmless but intimidating defenses, surrounded by dragons that refused to harm yet dominated the battlefield with presence alone. By the time palace security arrived, the intruders were subdued, bewildered, and humiliated. The Emperor himself appeared, eyes wide with a mix of pride and amazement. "I have witnessed bravery in many forms," he said, voice resonating through the crystalline corridors, "but never such a combination of courage, intellect, and understanding. You have turned what was once uncontrollable into something extraordinary." Kael simply shrugged, brushing a claw from Zoreth's snout. "I didn't do it alone. They trusted me. I just learned how to earn it." In the aftermath, the Emperor formally recognized Kael as the first human guardian of the Imperial Dragons, granting him privileges and authority previously reserved for the highest draconic scholars. The Council, while still wary, could not deny the undeniable. A human had achieved what none before could, and the palace itself had been transformed in the process. The dragons flourished under Kael's care. Lyrics became a symbol of curiosity and courage, often seen exploring distant corridors with Kael close behind. Sapon became a protector, quietly monitoring the palace's comings and goings. Trelia's playful antics brought laughter to even the most solemn advisors, while Zoreth, once feared, became a guardian who respected the human who had earned his loyalty. Beyond the nursery, Kael's influence began to reshape perceptions of humanity throughout the galaxy. Diplomats and scholars marveled at a species that, through empathy and intellect rather than brute force, could forge bonds with creatures thought untamable. The story of a lone human calming the Emperor's dragons spread from system to system, challenging long-held beliefs about human inferiority and inspiring admiration, and sometimes fear among other civilizations. Kael, however, remained humble. Each day he continued his quiet routines, observing the hatchlings, learning from them, and allowing them to teach him in return. He knew that his role was not to dominate or command, but to foster understanding, a principle that, while simple, had never been fully grasped by the galaxy at large. Years later, when the hatchlings matured into majestic, formidable dragons, they never forgot the human who had earned their trust. Kael Rivers had proven that humanity's greatest strength was not in weapons, technology, or conquest, but in patience, empathy, and brilliance of mind. Where others had failed through fear or force, the human had succeeded through understanding, and in doing so, reshaped the very definition of what it meant to be a species capable of greatness. The Emperor, standing once more at the nursery's entrance, watched as dragons and human moved in seamless harmony. "No one could handle them," he murmured to himself, "until you arrived. You have shown us all something the galaxy has long forgotten, that intelligence and compassion together can achieve the impossible." Kael smiled, watching lyrics soar past with a playful twist, Trelia racing along the crystalline floors, and Zorith leaning down for a gentle nuzzle. "They taught me as much as I taught them," he said softly. "And perhaps in the end, that is what true strength always looks like." And in that moment, in the golden light of the twin suns spilling through the palace windows, a human had changed the course of history, not with weapons or authority, but with heart, brilliance, and the courage to try something no one else dared.